Okay. All right, guys, this entire unit that we're getting ready to do is on radicals, which means square root. Okay, we're not going any higher than square root, although there are cubed roots, 7 roots, 8 roots, all that kind of happy stuff. All we really need to focus on in math 2 is square roots. So I'm going to show you how to go from square root to an exponent that's a fraction, and to go from exponent that's a fraction to square root. Okay, that is our goal for today. The rest of the time before spring break, we're going to talk about simplifying radicals, adding and subtracting them, multiplying and dividing. Okay, and that's what you're going to quiz on. When you come back, we'll talk about solving and how to graph them and all of that stuff. So, with that being said, the first thing we're going to talk about is how to rewrite the expression using rational exponent notation. So, you all know about exponents. X to the second, X to the 8th, X to the 9th, so on and so forth. Now we're talking rationals to the 7/10. Okay. So now we're talking fraction. If you open this up, it wants us to rewrite the expression using rational exponent notation and then simplify. So, in other words, we're going from a number or an exponent, or a number with an exponent or a variable with an exponent that is a fraction, and we're going to change it into square root. So, what happens here is the bottom part of your fraction becomes the index here. Okay, that tells you what root. So, n tells you what root. The m is the exponent of the number or variable. Okay. So, the top number of your fraction stays underneath the square root. The n comes outside and becomes the root that you're trying to find. Okay, so with your examples, number 1, this becomes 9. Which one of those numbers is my exponent? My 1 or my 2?
1.
Which one is your exponent?
1.
The 1 is your exponent. So this stays 9 to the first. Okay. Then you draw your little root symbol. And your index is a 2. So another way to write this is the square root of 9 to the first. You're going to do the same thing for the rest of these. So number 2, this is 8 to the second power. Draw your root symbol, and the 3 goes out front as an index. Notice I write the 3 really small. It's not being multiplied. It's called your index, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. So this is the cubed root of 8 to the second power. This can also be written as the cubed root. What's 8 to the second power?
64.
64. 8 times 8 is 64. And actually, let's go do this too. Your cubed root of 64 is actually a 4. Your final answer here is a 4. Okay. 4 times 4 times 4 is 64. You can even go back and solve number 1. What's the square root of 9? Square root. 9. 3. 3 times 3 is 9. So this one's actually a 3 too. All right. Number 3. This is going to be x to the third. Okay. So they say that as the 5th root of x to the third?
Dwayne.
The fifth root of x to the third. Questions?
Dwayne Mills.
Dwayne? Dwayne The Rock Johnson?
Yes.
The
Who
goat.
is that?
Bro.
Who's that?
You don't
The
know who
Rock?
that is?
The
You
Rock.
know The Rock. Bro.
You smell.
La 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 la. But The Rock is cooking.
No.
You know who it is.
They know who it is, bro.
Oh my God, Stefan, don't do
Like,
that.
he played in Fast and Furious, bro.
Right, he played in so many movies.
All right.
Down wrong.
On the other side.
Wait, I have a question.
I have an answer.
Isn't Andre
Andre the
He
Giant?
died, bro.
and
He died.
Who's Andre the
He
Giant?
died, bro.
He wrestled.
He was a legend. He
and
died.
Roman Reigns and the Usos, are they all cousins? They're
Yeah, they're related. The Rock related.
Because The Rock's father, I think.
Bro, I think
Bro,
that's
Not
no.
The Rock's father.
Can we get through this and we'll talk about that afterwards? Please.
You don't know.
the big
Guys.
bro? Man, I
You
don't
know
know.
Yeah, let's
Come
get
on, let's
this
do this
because he's
one.
making me mad. Let's get it.
Okay. So on the other side, we can rewrite the ones that are in radical notation back into the fraction form. So instead of going 8 to the 2/3 and changing it to radical, we're going from radical to fraction. So
Radical to fraction.
remember, whatever it's raised to is the top part of the fraction. It's your numerator. And whatever the index is your denominator. So this is 13. What is 13 raised to underneath? What's the exponent on 13 underneath the radical?
Nothing.
There's nothing there, which means there's a what?
One.
A 1. Fantastic. So this is 13 to the 1 over, what's my index?
5.
5.
It's 5,000.
Okay. 13 to the 1/5. Okay. Number 5. This is 25. What is it raised to? The 1. And my index is 3. 25 to the 1/3. Okay. Number 6. This is 7 raised to the 5. No. That's going to be your downfall. When you read this without this 5 written here, how would you read that?
You said
Square root of 7. What's it mean to square root something that's a what? Square.
divide
What number is square?
2.
2. So that means
14.
when there is no index written there, when this is blank, there is an unwritten 2. Square root means there's a 2.
That's
Okay.
Illuminati, bro.
So that's one thing that's going to be your downfall if you don't pay attention, because normally if it's not written, it's an automatic 1. And square root, if it's an unwritten index, it's an automatic 2. Okay, so be very careful. Okay, we're going to go down to the middle section then. Product rule on the left. Okay, so let's review real fast. Let's see if you can figure this out. If I had x to the second times x to the third, that gives me x to the what? 5th. If I had x to the 21st times x to the 16th, this becomes x to the 37. What are you doing to your exponents? Adding them. Okay, your product rule does not change here. Okay, you still add your exponents together, but instead of having whole numbers, we have fractions. So, when you have x to the 1/5 times x to the 3/5, this becomes x to the 1/5 plus 3/5. Oops, I didn't mean to put an equal sign there. Ignore that equal sign. What is 1/5 plus 3/5?
4/5.
4/5. If you don't know that, plug it in your calculator.
I just got new
Okay.
taxes.
Oh my God.
So your final answer here is x to the 4/5. How do I rewrite that as a radical? It's x to the what? 4. And it's the 5th root. Okay, so either one of these answers would work. You could leave it in rational exponent or in radical. Both of those answers are correct. Okay, number 8. This is going to be easier to do if we change it to rational exponents first. So this first one is x to the, what does my fraction look like if I have the 4th root of x? 1/4. Good, Christian. This is x to the 1/4 times x to the 2/3. So this becomes x to the, what's 1/4 plus 2/3? And again, I know you hate fractions, so plug it into your calculator. 1 divided by 4 plus 2 divided by 3. What do you get? Change it back to a fraction. Please do not leave it as a decimal. You said 11/12? Yeah. Okay, so this becomes x to the 11/12. Bless you. If I want to change this into radical form, what is my index? What's the number that goes in front of the square root there? 12 and x to the 11th power. So this answer or this answer. Okay, does not matter which. They both mean the same thing. It's just another way to write it.
Sweating.
Okay, so you just got done telling me if I multiply, I add my exponents. What happens if I divide? We subtract. Okay? So on the other side, again, your rule doesn't change. It's just this time you're dealing with fractions. So x to the 7/10 divided by x to the 6/10 becomes x to the 7/10 minus 6/10. What do you get when you subtract 7/10 minus 6/10? 1/10. Which we can also write that as what root? What's my index here? 10. X to the 1. Okay. And again, both of these answers mean the same thing. Number 10. Again, my suggestion to you is to make it rational exponent first. So on the top, I have x to the 5/6. And in the bottom, I have x to the 2/6. Again, we're dividing. So this is x to the 5/6 minus 2/6. What do we get when we take 5/6 minus 2/6? 3/6. What does that reduce to? 1/2. X to the 1/2. And again, we can rewrite this as, okay, this is a 2 on the outside. Remember, when it is an index of 2, we don't have to write it. All we need is that square root. Okay, so x to the 1/2 literally looks like this, the square root of x. There is nothing else you need to do with it. Your index or your exponent is a 1, you don't need to write it. And when your index is a 2, you do not need to write it. Questions?
No, ma'am. Look at my play.
Okay, two more. Two more review rules. The power rule with rational exponents. Okay, your power rule. When you have 1 on the inside of the parentheses and a power on the outside, It's A raised to the M times N. So whenever we do the power rule, we multiply your exponents. So number 11 is X to the 3/5 times 1/2. So what's 3/5 times 1/2?
310.
3/10.
I'm gonna do multiply straight across.
3 times 1 is 3. 5 times 2 is 10. Okay. How do I write that in radical form?
10 on the outside.
10 roots of x to the third. The 10th root of x to the third. Okay. Number 12. We get x to the 3/4 times 2/3. Becomes x to the 6 over 12, which reduces to 1/2. So it can just be the square root of x. Raising something to the 1/2 is just taking the square root of it.
That's what you just missed.
I didn't. Okay. Last review rule. Negative and zero rules with rational exponents. Okay. If your exponent is negative and your exponent is in the top, you throw it to the bottom. If it's negative in the bottom, you throw it to the top. Okay? If anything is raised to the 0, your answer is 1 every time. It doesn't matter what it is. I can raise Stefan to the 0, and the answer is a 1. Okay? So, quickly, number 14. I've got x raised to the 3/4, all raised to the 0 power. It's 1.
Oh, right.
It's one.
Okay?
It's one.
It's 1.
It's one. Wow.
Okay, number 13. Watch what happens. I have that exponent on the outside. Well, this exponent goes with each piece in here. So this becomes 4 to the negative 3/2 and 9 to the negative 3/2. Well, 4 has an exponent of 1. 9 has an exponent of 1. So that just makes it the negative 3/2. Okay, now I don't want my exponents to be negative. So the 4 is in the top and its exponent is negative. So it needs to move to the bottom. So 4 goes down here now. Your exponent doesn't change. It just becomes positive when you move it. 9 started in the bottom with a negative exponent. So it goes to the top. Okay. And again, you can rewrite both of these in radical form. So you have a 2 in the bottom, so your index is a 2, so it's a square root of 9 to the third. Divided by, again, your index is a 2, so square root of 4 to the third. Last thing I want to do, what's 9 to the third power? 9 times 9 is
81.
81 times 9 is
243.
729.
What?
17.
Because remember, you take 9 times 9, which is 81, and then you have to take 81 times 9, which is 729.
I would never get it.
Okay. Same thing on the bottom. 4 times 4 is 16 times 4 is 64.
81.
Okay. So, any one of these answers, these all mean the same thing. Questions?
No, I'm ready.
Okay, this clues in on page 74 in your notebooks.